Hey everyone, it's Dr. Nightstare. Glad you're here. Before we get into it, hit like and subscribe. It really helps the channel. Quick question before we start. Where are you watching from, and what time is it for you right now? Alright, let's get settled. Get comfortable, let your body relax, and just take it easy. The day after Liam's funeral, the house felt too large, the air too still around us. Mother sat on the living room sofa, her hands clasped around a teacup that had grown cold hours ago, her eyes fixed on nothing in particular. Father stood by the front window, his broad shoulders hunched, watching the steady rain outside wash over the empty street. I walked into the kitchen, my quiet footsteps distinct on the floorboards, each sound lingering. No usual morning clatter of Liam's cereal bowl came from the table, no shouts from his room upstairs demanding attention. The house held only the quiet tick of the clock in the hall and the gentle hiss of water running through the pipes, sounds that usually vanished beneath the bustle of our lives, beneath Liam's vibrant presence. We moved through the rooms with a carefulness, performing small tasks, each action deliberate in the heavy quiet that now filled our home. Then the doorbell rang. It was late, past midnight, the kind of hour when only bad news or a mistake arrives. Father looked up, startled, his face drawn. Mother's head snapped towards the door, a sudden jolt of confusion on her face. Who could be there now? I walked towards the door, my heart beating a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I turned the lock and pulled the door open. Liam stood there. He was soaked from the rain, his dark hair plastered to his forehead. His clothes, the same dark suit he wore for his funeral, clung to him, wet and mud-streaked. His eyes, though, were what caught me. They held no light, only a deep, flat blackness that seemed to absorb the dim hallway illumination. A desperate hope filled me, a rush of joy and terror. My voice seized in my throat. Liam? I breathed the name, barely a sound. He stepped inside, his movements stiff, almost unnatural. He looked at each of us, his gaze lingering on Mother, then Father, then me. His lips parted, a dry, cracking sound escaped. They are coming, he said, his voice raspy and alien. You need to go. Now. My parents stared, their faces draining of color. Father took a step back, his hand rising as if to ward off a blow. Mother made a small, choked sound, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and utter disbelief. Liam was here, he was alive, yet he spoke of things that could not be true. The impossibility of his presence warred with the chilling reality of his words, a desperate, rising dread. Liam's warning hung in the air, a cold, unnatural breath. He turned slowly, his black eyes sweeping over us one last time, a silent plea or an accusation in their depth. Then he walked back out into the rain, leaving the door slightly ajar. We did not move, did not speak, simply watched the empty doorway as the rain continued to fall. The sound suddenly filled the house. Days blurred into a haze of unspoken terror. We tried to return to some semblance of life, each of us pretending his words had been a delusion, a cruel hallucination brought on by grief. We avoided looking at the door, avoided the windows after dark, but the quiet dread settled over us. Every creak of the house, every rustle of leaves outside became a potential threat. Father checked the locks again and again. Mother retreated further into herself, her gaze often fixed on the front door, a fearful expectancy in her eyes. I felt a cold knot tightening in my stomach, a constant awareness of the outside world pressing in. It happened again a week later. The doorbell rang just after midnight. This time the sound ripped through the fabricated calm of our denial. Father, his face pale and drawn, walked to the door with slow, desperate movements. Mother clutched my arm, her grip painful. He peered through the peephole, then stumbled back, a gasp escaping his lips. His hand trembled as he unlatched the locks. Liam stood there again. He was worse. His gray skin pulled taut over his cheekbones, and his lips were cracked and bleeding. One eye sagged slightly, a milky film clouding its surface, while the other still held that terrifying, flat blackness. He shivered, his body shaking violently, not just from the cold, but from some inner torment. His torn suit was caked with mud and what looked like dried blood, a dark stain blossoming across his chest. "They are closer," he croaked, his voice a raw whisper, barely audible over the rain. "They know you know. Let me in. They are here." Father recoiled further, a guttural sound rising in his throat. This was not our Liam, not fully. Mother started to weep, her body shaking. The image of the son we buried, the boy we loved, warred with this broken, frightening thing on our doorstep. I felt a cold fear mix with something else, a protective urge to keep this out. It was no longer about saving Liam, but about saving ourselves. "Let me in," Liam pleaded, his voice gaining a desperate edge. He took a staggering step forward. Father slammed his hand against the doorframe, stopping Liam. "No," he said, his voice thick with agony and resolve. "You cannot come in." He did not come in. He did not call him Liam. He just said you. A terrible silence descended, broken only by the incessant rain. Liam's good eye, the one still black and piercing, fixed on Father with a wounded intensity that twisted my gut. He was a stranger. He was a monster. He was still our son. Then the sounds began. A faint scratching started on the side of the house, a dragging noise that moved along the wall. It was just outside, too close. A soft thud echoed from the porch floor, the sound wet, then another, as if something heavy had been dropped. A whisper, low and deep, seemed to slither from the shadows beyond our porch light. A language I could not understand but felt deep in my bones. Liam stared past us into the darkness of our living room, his face contorted with pure terror. "They are here for you all," he rasped, his voice barely a breath. He turned slowly, his eyes now wide with a terror that mirrored our own, but was far deeper, far more immediate. He looked at the shadows, at the corners of our house, at the street beyond. The scratching intensified, now joined by a scraping sound closer to the door, a slow, deliberate movement against the wood. Father, his face a mask of horrified decision, shoved the door closed with heavy force, his action desperate. The click of the lock echoed like a gunshot in the sudden quiet. Father's sudden, desperate action of closing the door left a ringing quiet. He stared at the locked door, his chest heaved, his eyes wide with a horrifying realization. He moved to the small glass panel beside the door, bending low to peer through it. His gaze dropped to the ground outside. I moved closer, following his terrified stare, and then I saw them. Not just Liam's muddy prints, but many others, crisscrossing the wet porch planks, trailing into the flower beds, leading all around the house. Their shapes were odd, long and narrow, with multiple points, unlike anything human. A cold shiver ran through me, confirming Liam's warning. Mother pulled away from my side, stumbling back into the living room. Her hands covered her mouth. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice thin. Father stood upright, turning to face us. His eyes darted around the room as if searching for an escape. "There is no escape," he said, his voice final. "We are trapped." The house groaned around us. The scratching sounds on the side walls began again. They were louder, more numerous, a frantic sound that seemed to surround the entire structure. Thumps began on the roof, soft at first, then growing heavier. Objects dropped repeatedly onto the shingles. A scraping noise started at the front windows, a long grind against the glass that made us flinch. We heard shifting sounds from the back door, a soft, insistent rattling of the handle. They were testing every entry point. Then, piercing through the clamor, Liam's voice echoed. It was distorted, stretched, a chilling sound that seemed to emanate from the very air within the house, from the walls and the floor. "You cannot hide forever," he whispered. The words slithered into every corner, filling the space with his dread. "They are here for you all. They know you know." The voice faded, replaced by a greater assault. A violent banging started against the front door. The force shook the entire frame, threatening to splinter the wood. The sounds grew louder, more frantic, a relentless pounding that rattled the pictures on the walls. Then the doorbell rang. It rang once, then again, a ceaseless piercing peal that drilled into my brain. I looked at the clock on the mantelpiece. It read 17:13 a.m. The doorbell kept ringing, a continuous, demanding chime announcing their inevitable entry, a promise of horror that would never stop. Daniel always sought me out. For years, his presence loomed over my life, a constant threat waiting to emerge. I was frail, an easy target for his cruel games, and he relished every moment of my misery. He particularly loved watching my eyes well up with fear, a twisted satisfaction glowing in his own as I trembled. This unending torment carved deep into my spirit, leaving me hollow and alone. One Tuesday in late January, a freezing wind whipped through the school grounds, biting at exposed skin. I walked home, hugging my books close, and the air stung my cheeks. Daniel appeared from behind the row of snow-laden hedges, blocking my path. He showed a predatory smile. He said nothing, simply shoved me against the icy brick wall, and my head struck the hard surface. Pain exploded behind my eyes, blurring the world. He grabbed my coat collar, lifting me, then slammed my body back against the wall repeatedly. My bones ached. He swung his fist, connecting with my nose, and blood immediately gushed hot down my chin. I crumpled to the ground, disoriented, seeing the world spin. Daniel knelt over me, his face close, and I saw tears streaming from his eyes, not from sorrow but from an unsettling intensity. This unusual display did not stop him. He kept hitting me, a relentless assault of blows raining down on my ribs, my stomach, my arms. I curled into a ball, trying to protect myself, unable to fight back, and each impact stole my breath. He finally stood, leaving me sprawled on the cold concrete, my body racked with throbbing pain. I lay there, helpless and broken, feeling the icy ground against my cheek, and a single thought formed clearly in my battered mind. I wanted Daniel to die. Daniel did not appear at school the next day. He did not come the day after that either, or the rest of the week. A fragile peace began to settle over me, though the memory of his brutal attack still throbbed beneath my skin. My body slowly healed, but a deep uneasiness remained. Christmas break arrived, and I retreated into myself, unable to shake the lingering fear. I spent the first quiet days watching the snow fall, feeling distant from everything. My mother noticed my quiet demeanor one afternoon. She sat beside me on the couch, her hand resting lightly on my arm, her presence warm. She spoke gently about bullies, explaining how their cruelty often comes from their own unhappiness, and sometimes they simply disappear. She promised the upcoming Christmas would bring true happiness, a special time for forgetting bad things and embracing joy. Her comforting words, delivered with a steady voice, slowly began to mend my spirits. I started to look forward to the festive lights and the sweet scent of baking cookies. Our house filled with the sound of cheerful carols. The rich smell of pine needles from our tree now brought a sense of calm. I helped my mother decorate, carefully hanging each sparkling ornament. The simple act brought back a forgotten joy. The warmth of the season began to wash over me, pushing Daniel's hateful face further from my thoughts. I started to believe in the promise of a peaceful Christmas, a hopeful new beginning. Christmas morning burst with light. The air smelled of pine and cinnamon. I woke feeling immense joy. My parents sat by the glowing tree in the living room. We drank hot chocolate, and I eagerly tore into the presents. Each gift brought a smile, a toy robot, a new book, a soft sweater. My mother watched me with warmth. My father chuckled at my excitement. The entire world felt right. After the last identified gift was opened, my mother pointed to a remaining package tucked behind the tree. It was wrapped in plain brown paper, completely unadorned. A small tag was tied to the string, simply printed with the name Nick. My mother picked it up. She looked at my father with a questioning gaze. My father shook his head. They did not recognize the parcel. They knew nothing about it. They said they had not placed it there. My mother handed the brown package to me. The paper felt thick against my fingers. I pulled at the string, untying the knot. The paper tore easily. Inside, a wooden box rested there. It was dark, smoothly finished. I lifted the lid slowly, my fingers trembling with curiosity. A terrible smell erupted into the air. It was metallic and rotten. My mother screamed, a sharp sound piercing the festive quiet. My father cried out, a choked gasp. My own eyes stared down into the box. Daniel Carson's head looked up at me. His eyes were wide. His mouth was open. Blood matted his hair. His skin was pale. My parents reeled back in horror. They gripped each other tightly, their faces white. My mother covered her mouth with a shaking hand. My father stumbled back against the couch. They stared at the box, then at me. But a warmth spread through my chest. A smile stretched across my face. It was knowing. I could not stop it. A gurgling laugh bubbled from my throat. It escaped me, uncontrollable. My laughter filled the quiet room. My stomach growled, a hollow sound against the eviction notice taped to my apartment door. The landlord's bold red handwriting glared at me, demanding last month's rent plus a late fee. My savings account showed a single digit. I pushed past the flyer, careful not to tear the notice, and entered my cramped studio apartment. Empty ramen packets overflowed the small trash can. Unopened textbooks lay scattered across the floor. My phone buzzed with another ignored call from my mother, surely asking about tuition money I did not have. A few weeks ago, a military recruiter had approached me outside the campus library. His pressed uniform and bright smile stood out against the tired students. He talked about steady pay and a future free of debt. I had just shaken my head and walked away, focusing on my next exam. He appeared again by the cafeteria, then near the student union building. His presence became a persistent interruption in my daily struggle. I always found a way to avoid his gaze, dismissing his words. Yesterday, a plain white envelope arrived in my mailbox. It had no return address. The paper felt thick and expensive. I tore it open, expecting junk mail or another bill. Inside was a single sheet of paper with stark black print. It offered an immediate opportunity to participate in a medical study. The compensation amount was staggering, more money than I could possibly earn in years of part-time work. It promised a fast solution to all my problems, a way to pay the rent and tuition. My hands shook as I reread the details. A desperate hope grew inside my chest. This was it. I followed the printed directions to a long stretch of highway that became increasingly desolate. The pavement turned rough and cracked, leading deep into a landscape of scrub brush and stunted trees. My old sedan protested with every bump, the engine whining as I finally spotted the facility. It rose from the flat land like a block of dark, unyielding concrete, several stories high with no visible windows. A tall chain-link fence topped with razor wire encircled the entire perimeter. The only entrance was a heavy steel gate with a small guard shack. My hopeful anticipation began to curdle into a cold knot in my stomach. This place did not look like a medical clinic. A uniformed guard waved me through the gate without speaking. I parked in the empty lot and walked toward the building's main entrance. The air felt heavy and still. A single door of brushed metal slid open before I reached it. Inside, the same recruiter stood waiting. His smile seemed too wide, his eyes too bright for the dim, sterile hallway. He extended a hand that gripped mine with surprising force. "Donovan, so glad you made it," he said, pulling me forward. His voice carried an artificial warmth that did not match the cold building. He did not offer any explanation or pleasantries beyond that greeting. He simply turned and led me down another hallway, his stride purposeful and fast. My questions died on my tongue as he ignored my attempts to speak, his focus fixed ahead. We passed several identical metal doors before he stopped at one and motioned me inside. The room was small, stark, and too bright. White walls and a white floor gleamed under overhead lights. The only furniture was a single chair positioned in the center. It was not a comfortable medical recliner. It was an intimidating metal frame with thick leather straps hanging from the armrests and leg rests. A head restraint jutted from the top. My heart pounded against my ribs. "Just get comfortable," the recruiter said, his smile still fixed on his face. He pushed me toward the chair. I resisted for a moment, my mind racing, but his grip on my arm was unyielding. He maneuvered me into the seat. Before I could voice my panic, he moved with practiced efficiency, tightening the straps around my wrists, ankles, and chest. The leather dug into my skin, holding me fast. I strained against the restraints, fear now a burning acid in my throat. "What is this?" I managed to choke out. The recruiter leaned close, his smile finally fading, replaced by a vacant look. His eyes held no warmth, no recognition. "The opportunity," he stated, his voice flat and empty. He turned away and picked up a large syringe from a nearby counter. The needle glinted under the harsh lights. A clear, viscous liquid filled the chamber. It was then I understood. I was not a volunteer in a medical trial. I was the trial. My screams were swallowed by the silence of the room. The needle plunged into my arm. A cold liquid pushed into my veins. It became a burning sensation that spread quickly through my chest. Then a strange euphoria bloomed inside me. It was not a gentle warmth, but a surge of raw power. My muscles tensed, buzzing with an energy I had never known. The chair's straps became flimsy. My body pulsed with a raw power. A furious heat erupted in my mind, erasing all thought except an uncontrollable rage. My vision narrowed to a crimson haze. The leather bands snapped under the sudden expansion of my limbs. I tore the thick straps from my wrists and ankles, the metal frame groaning as I twisted free. I rose from the shattered chair, my body vibrating with an immense, terrifying strength. The door burst open. Two figures in dark uniforms rushed in. They carried heavy stun batons. I did not hesitate. My hand shot out, grabbing the first man's head. I twisted, and his neck broke with a wet crack. I threw his limp body against the wall. The second guard stared at me, his eyes wide with disbelief and terror. I lunged, my fingers closing around his throat. I squeezed until his struggles stopped. The recruiter appeared in the doorway, his face pale with horror. He began to back away, stumbling. I moved faster than he could react. I seized him, lifting his struggling form from the floor. His bones crunched in my grip. I bit into his neck, tearing away flesh. Hot blood gushed into my mouth. I consumed his soft organs. the taste filling me with a savage satisfaction. I then tore into the bodies of the guards, ripping away muscle and sinew, consuming everything I could. A gnawing hunger took hold, deeper than any I had known. My old life, the eviction notice, the tuition, my mother's calls. All those concerns dissolved into nothing. They were meaningless, replaced by a singular, overwhelming instinct. My mind cleared of everything except the burning need for more. I needed food. The primal command resonated through my rewired being, overriding every past thought, every human memory. The world outside this room held only one promise: more food to satisfy the insatiable hunger now driving me. The night was dark and bitterly cold. The moon stayed hidden behind thick clouds, casting no light upon the world. I walked into the dense blackness, my boots crunching on frozen ground, searching for him. He was a living shadow, a creature who reveled in the dark. This hunt was a ritual, one I undertook every single night. The cold bit into my exposed skin, numbing my fingers and stiffening my jaw. I could barely see my hand moving in front of my face. The world outside appeared a shapeless void around me. Despite the near blindness and the biting wind, I pushed forward. There was no question of stopping my mission. I needed to find him before the night ended. The search carried me towards the cow pasture, a common first stop on my nightly route. I saw Henry, the large bull, standing near the fence line. "Henry, have you seen him tonight?" I called, but the wind swallowed my words. This was a question I asked him every night, a futile act I performed out of habit. The herd watched me with dark eyes, their bodies still against the cold air. They stood unmoving as I passed them. My boots crunched on the frozen ground, the only sound. The cold wind howled, swallowing my calls. This search always felt like an endless circular task. The relentless search wore on my body. My limbs felt heavy and stiff from the cold, and weariness settled into my bones. I almost gave in to the urge to turn back towards the warmth of the house. I hoped he would simply appear on my return path. I raised my flashlight again, sending a focused beam into the absolute blackness. The narrow light landed directly on a pair of eyes. They were small and gleamed close to the frozen ground, reflecting the single beam back at me. "There you are," I said aloud, my voice hoarse from the cold air. "I knew you were playing this game." The eyes blinked once and then moved out of the flashlight's beam, disappearing into the surrounding darkness. The light showed an empty patch of ground, but I knew he was still close by, his presence confirmed. I turned and walked toward the house, feeling the cold wind push against my body with every step. I reached the door and pulled it open, allowing warm air to escape into the bitter night. The shadow skittered past my legs and vanished into the lit entryway. In the warmth and light of the entryway, Bailey appeared. He was a black lab mix, and he was large. His tail wagged. He looked up at me with a smug expression that showed his triumph. I sighed. "You do this every night, Bailey," I said. "You know you cannot stay outside in the freezing cold. You just love making me come looking for you. Now come on, get your food." The harsh, shrill tone of the monitor ripped through my last breath, and then a sudden blank void consumed everything. Just as suddenly, I was lying in my old bed. The familiar striped quilt was pulled up to my chin. My cheek rested against the cool, worn pillowcase. My bedroom window let in the morning light, painting bright rectangles on the carpet. I felt the warmth of the sun on my skin. I heard the distant chirping of birds outside. My lungs expanded with real air, filling with each breath. A vast relief settled through me. I understood a mistake had been made, and then it had been corrected. I was alive once more, alive in the space I knew best. Hope grew within me. Everything felt as it should be. The morning light felt warm on my face. I opened my eyes fully, ready to begin this second chance at life. I tried to sit up, to throw off the covers and stand on the familiar carpet, but my muscles did not respond. I pushed against the mattress with my arms, but they remained still beneath the striped quilt. My chest tightened with confusion. I wanted to call out, to announce my return, but no sound escaped my throat. My jaw was locked tight. My tongue lay limp within my mouth. My eyes could move, tracking the familiar patterns on the wallpaper, but nothing else obeyed my will. The immediate relief of being home shattered into cold, hard panic. The cherished room, once a haven of warmth and memories, now shifted. It transformed into a silent, inescapable cell. The window, previously a portal to the outside world, became a fixed frame showcasing an unchanging scene. The light from the window held its position for an impossibly long time, painting the same bright rectangles on the carpet. Hours passed as if minutes, then minutes stretched into an eternity. I was not truly alive. I was an unmoving, unseeing prisoner within my own skin. The light eventually dimmed outside the window. Darkness settled, and then the door to my room creaked open. A shadowy figure stepped inside. It was Mom. Her form was indistinct, a deeper shadow against the room's gloom, but I knew it was her. She moved to the side of my bed. Her pale hands reached out, pulling the striped quilt higher, tucking it under my chin. Her touch was cold, a chill seeping through the fabric. Then she turned and left, the door closing with a click. The room was dark once more. This happened every night. The cycle began again with the dawn, the bright rectangles returning to the carpet. The light held its position for what felt like endless days. Then the darkness, the creaking door, Mom's silent entrance, her cold hands, the quilt adjustment, her departure. Each iteration was identical. The cheerful details of my room, once vivid, began to change. The floral pattern on the wallpaper, once bright, seemed muted. Small, dark spots appeared on the white paint of the skirting board. A thread began to unravel from the edge of the quilt, growing longer with each passing night. A sweet decay began to permeate the air. It was not noticeable at first. It grew stronger, a sickly sweet presence. The wood of my dresser showed dark patches. Under the flaking paint, something dark and moist seemed to pulse. The once comforting room was not just holding me captive, it was falling apart around me, revealing a grotesque reality beneath its surface. The decay was slow but relentless, an insidious rot consuming my childhood haven. My body remained an unmoving vessel. My thoughts raced without stop. I counted each loop. Every repetition imprinted itself on my awareness, a new mark on an endless tally. 100, 1,000, 10,000. The number grew beyond comprehension. I screamed, a soundless, endless shriek inside my head. The raw terror of my predicament amplified with each passing cycle. My mind strained against the walls of its prison, desperate for release that never came. The night arrived. The door creaked open. The shadowy figure of Mom stepped inside. Her movements shifted. Her approach to the bed grew slower, her form seeming to lean closer. Her pale hands lingered longer on the striped quilt, their cold pressure pressing down more firmly. Then a sound began. A wet clicking sound came from the shadowy figure. It was not a random noise. The sound felt purposeful, a deliberate rhythm that accompanied her every motion. It echoed the frantic beat of my own conscious mind, a chilling acknowledgement of my internal screams. The clicking grew louder each night. It vibrated through the mattress, a malicious vibration that seemed to seek me out, confirming an active, terrifying awareness. The entity knew I was awake. It heard my silent agony. It responded. The window's last light faded, leaving the room in an impenetrable, permanent gloom. A thick, dark crust grew across the glass, hardening into an opaque seal, forever blocking the world outside. The room became a timeless, absolute twilight. The cycle of dread tightened, an unyielding, unchanging rhythm. The door creaked open at its immutable interval, the shadowy form of Mom stepping inside, a deeper blackness within the gloom. She approached the bed, her unseeing face turning towards my motionless form. Her cold hands reached for the striped quilt, adjusting its position beneath my chin. This was the sequence. My consciousness endured, a captive witness to the unending recurrence of the creaking door, the unseeing shadow, and the cold hands. No beginning existed for this loop, no end for this conscious imprisonment. This was the torment without resolution, perpetual and inescapable. I knocked twice on the painted green door, and it opened slowly, revealing Miss Harridan. Her smile was thin, and her eyes were a watery blue. She wore a starched apron over a floral dress. She invited me inside with a wave of her hand, so I stepped into a warm, quiet room where a grandfather clock ticked in the corner. The room smelled of old potpourri and baked sugar. She gestured toward a plush armchair, and I sat down on the soft fabric. A silver tray waited on the polished coffee table where 2 cups and saucers sat ready. The teapot was a delicate porcelain. She poured the dark liquid into one of the cups. "Officer Dudley, a cup of tea will certainly help calm the nerves during such troubling times," she said, her voice a reedy sound. I took the offered cup, feeling the porcelain warm in my hand. "Thank you, Miss Harridan. I appreciate the hospitality." She settled herself opposite me, her gaze fixing on the second unused cup. Such a shame about those poor children. It must be difficult work searching for them. Her eyes held a distant look. I nodded. "It is, ma'am. We're doing everything we can." She traced the rim of her empty cup with a finger. "This set was my sister's. She always loved a good tea. We never used it after she left us." She paused, then added, "I keep it ready, though, just in case." I took a sip of the tea, finding it strong and flowery. "A lovely set, ma'am," I offered. She smiled again, that thin smile, and her gaze drifted around the room. "It does seem a waste to have it just sit there. All these fine cups, unused." She looked back at me, her voice dropped. "Such a large house for just one person, isn't it? Plenty of space, plenty of rooms." I took another sip of the strong, flowery tea. A strange warmth spread through my chest, calming the persistent edge of weariness I carried from weeks of searching. Ms. Harridan watched me, her watery blue eyes unblinking. "Tell me, Officer Dudley," she began, her voice soft, "what is the most challenging part of your work? Finding lost things or dealing with people?" The question seemed innocent enough, yet it held a particular weight. I found myself wanting to answer truthfully, a sudden urge to confide in this elderly woman. "People can be difficult, ma'am," I admitted, the words coming easily, "especially when they don't want to be found or when they cause trouble for others." The tea felt good, almost like a balm on frayed nerves. I felt a pleasant fog begin to settle over my thoughts, making everything feel simpler. Miss Harridan nodded slowly, her thin smile returning. "Indeed, people do cause trouble. They are often rather inconsiderate of others' peace, aren't they? Always making noise, always demanding attention." She leaned forward slightly, her gaze unwavering. "Children, in particular, can be quite a handful, full of energy, full of demands." My hand trembled slightly as I lifted the cup again. The tea was incredibly soothing. "Yes, ma'am," I said, my voice feeling strangely distant. A sense of agreement washed over me, a deep understanding of her words. The room, which had seemed merely quiet before, now felt profoundly peaceful, a refuge from the chaotic world outside. Ms. Harridan's voice took on a lower, almost hypnotic cadence. It must be frustrating for you, an officer of the law, to constantly deal with such disruptions, to have to enforce rules for those who simply refuse to listen. I could only nod, the tea's effect now a dominant force. My mind felt pliable, open to her suggestions. The frustration she spoke of felt real, intensified by the peculiar clarity the tea offered. Her questions were no longer innocent. They were leading, probing, and I was utterly willing to follow wherever she led. I saw the quiet intensity in her eyes. The politeness of her initial greeting had dissolved into something else, a focused intent that was both unsettling and utterly compelling. The world outside felt less important now, blurred by the gentle haze that had taken root in my mind. Ms. Harridan leaned back, a genuine smile spreading across her face, replacing the thin line I had grown accustomed to. Her eyes, no longer watery, held a keen, intelligent glint. "You see, Officer Dudley, this tea is quite special. It helps people see things clearly from my perspective. It makes them helpful." She chuckled softly, a dry, rustling sound like autumn leaves. The gentle haze in my mind deepened, but it no longer felt like a blur. Instead, everything Miss Harridan said seemed profoundly logical, utterly right. My own thoughts felt clumsy and irrelevant compared to her calm certainty. My uniform felt strangely tight, a constricting skin I suddenly wanted to shed. "Yes, ma'am," I managed, the words feeling right and natural. She lowered her voice, though the room was still, the grandfather clock ticking its slow, deliberate rhythm. "Those children, the ones you are searching for, they are rather loud, aren't they? And so very demanding. Always drawing attention." She paused, her gaze steady on me. "They are downstairs, in my basement, and they are becoming quite an annoyance." A wave of understanding washed over me, a perfect clarity the tea had gifted. Annoyances. Yes, that was precisely what they were. The concept of missing children had been replaced by the more accurate description of annoying children. My role as a police officer, once about protecting and serving, now seemed much simpler: to deal with annoyances. Ms. Harridan watched me, her smile widening into something almost gleeful. "You understand, don't you? You see the trouble they cause." I nodded slowly, feeling a deep sense of purpose solidify within me. The frustration I had felt for weeks, searching, questioning, it all vanished. Here was the solution, presented with such elegant simplicity. "I understand, ma'am," I said, my voice firm. She reached across the table, her hand, surprisingly strong, closing over my arm. Her grip felt like an affirmation. "Good. Because I need your help, Officer Dudley. You know how to make people comply." She released my arm. My gaze drifted to my side, to the weight of my holstered weapon. The cold steel felt comforting, a tool for maintaining peace, for ensuring compliance. I patted the weapon, a silent agreement. The world outside, with its rules and its chaos, was gone. Here, in this quiet room, under the influence of Ms. Harridan's special tea, a new reality had begun. I was her accomplice now. My mouth pulled wide, a smile pasted firmly on my face for all to see. My cheeks ached from holding the pose, but I maintained it, showing only absolute cheer. My eyes moved quickly to the door, a brief scan for Mama and Papa hiding within. Their lives relied on this act, and my convincing happiness was their only shield. My stomach tightened with worry, forming a hard ball inside. I kept my posture straight, my head angled just so. I clapped my hands together, A sudden, loud sound in the still air. The bright ribbons on my dress spun as I turned, projecting an artificial delight for any observer. My body felt rigid, every limb tense. I had to be perfect, because one wrong movement, one lapse in my performance, meant everything would collapse. I let out a high, clear laugh then, a sound that did not feel like my own, originating from my throat. It echoed in the quiet room, a forced merriment filling the space. My heart beat fast against my ribs. The front door clicked open then, a small sound against my forced laughter. Our neighbor, Mrs. Gable, stood on the threshold, her mouth pulled wide in a smile of bright cheer. Her eyes stayed fixed on me, unblinking. She surveyed my face, lingering on the tightness of my cheeks and the sparkle in my eyes. A small bell, the kind children wore on their collars during the Festival of Joy, tinkled softly from her wrist when she shifted her weight. "Is that the proper joy I hear, little one?" Her voice was sweet, but each word felt sharp, cutting through the thin air. I spun again, my ribbons flying. My hands clapped together, a loud, sharp sound that echoed in the quiet room. Her gaze followed my every movement. Her stare stayed fixed, missing nothing. "You seem very busy today, preparing for the festival, aren't you?" She took another step inside, closing the door behind her with a soft click. "Oh yes, Mrs. Gable." I am bursting with joy. I practically shouted, my voice straining. She took a step further into the room, her gaze sweeping past me towards the darker corners where Mama and Papa hid. My stomach clenched tighter, pulling into a painful knot. "Last year, your cousin Thomas found the joy a little late, did he not?" Her voice remained soft, but a chill ran down my spine. He had to be shown the way, I recall. The festival teaches valuable lessons about promptness. "Are you truly ready to celebrate the Festival of Joy this year, my dear?" She stepped closer, her smile unwavering, revealing a perfect row of white teeth. Her eyes, however, seemed to probe deeper now. My own smile tightened, feeling brittle now. I nodded vigorously, almost hurting my neck. "I am, Mrs. Gable. Truly, truly ready. My heart sings with it." She stopped a few feet from me, her head tilted slightly. "Because the festival does not tolerate tardiness, nor does it forgive incomplete joy. The celebration requires full participation, always." Her gaze swept across my face one last time, a final assessment before she turned her head slightly towards the hidden door. Mrs. Gable's head tilted further, her eyes shifting past me, towards the window. I heard a rhythmic thudding from outside, measured footsteps joining in unison. It grew louder, pressing against our walls, carrying no cheer. Cold dread filled me as hollow chanting began, a meaningless phrase repeating, rising and falling in a wave of forced merriment. This sound signaled the celebration's beginning. The thudding became deafening. Chanting vibrated through the floorboards. Dozens, then hundreds, moved past, empty voices filling the street. My breath hitched. Mama and Papa were still hidden. I had to act. The celebrants' sound was almost on us, their steps slowing outside. I imagined a wall of smiling faces watching, their empty joy demanding compliance. Mrs. Gable's eyes came back to me, sharp now. Her perfect teeth showed, her eyes holding no warmth. The sound outside intensified, a crescendo of mechanical steps and forced celebration. I had to prove everything. My hands flew up, reaching for my head. I ripped bright ribbons from my hair, letting them flutter to the floor. I stomped my foot against the wood. My face stretched wider, a false delight. I let out a piercing shriek of laughter, louder and higher, a sound of desperate joy, tears pricking at my eyes. My dress spun as I shouted, "Joy! Joy! The festival has come!" My voice cracked, strained, forcing desperate energy into my performance. The approaching celebrant sound peaked outside, loud and demanding. My dance was for them, for Mama and Papa, for our lives. Mrs. Gable watched me, her smile finally softening into something almost approving. The sound of the celebrants slowly faded down the street, their hollow chanting diminishing into the distance. She nodded once, a brief, sharp movement, and then turned to the door. "Good joy, little one," she said, her voice entirely devoid of its earlier edge. "See you soon." She stepped out, closing the door softly behind her. I stood there trembling, the false laughter still catching in my throat. My body slumped, my ribbons scattered on the floor. I looked towards the hidden door, waiting for Mama and Papa to emerge, but they did not. The room became quiet. I walked slowly to the small, cracked calendar hanging by the fireplace. My fingers traced the date marked Festival of Joy. My eyes drifted to the next week and the week after that. Every single Thursday was circled, each one marked with the same cheerful looping script. The date today was Thursday. My father spent his entire life turning bodies into ash. He died in a house fire. The irony did not escape me, nor did it soften the bitter taste in my mouth. I now inherited his crematory, a place I wished to burn to the ground myself. My girlfriend Clara suggested we could make a good living from it. Her voice sounded hopeful but naive. I told her no with a firmness that left no room for discussion. The business meant only misery. It embodied a lifetime of neglect. I wanted nothing more than to be rid of it forever. We arrived at the crematory, a squat building of stained concrete. I parked the car by the loading dock. Clara gave the structure a cautious look. I told her to wait inside the small office attached to the main building. I needed to inspect the furnaces at once. She nodded and walked towards the office door. I turned instead to the wide steel door leading into the chamber. It felt heavy and cold as I pushed it open. The air inside was still and tasted of burnt things, a smell that clung to my father's clothes. 3 enormous ovens filled the space, silent and dark. Their sheer size brought back the familiar ache of neglect from my childhood. I remembered standing here, a small boy, watching my father disappear behind these roaring furnaces, consumed by the heat, his face glowing, his back always turned to me. He spent his life with these ovens, not with me. This place was his entire world, and I was never part of it. I needed to confirm the ovens still worked, ensuring a quick sale could happen. I wanted to be done with this place, to erase the last trace of his legacy and all the emptiness it represented. I located the control panel on the wall, its buttons worn smooth from years of use. I pressed the ignition button for the central oven. A sudden roar filled the chamber as gas ignited, and orange flames erupted within the furnace. The heat swelled, pushing against me. From the heart of the fire, a voice spoke. It carried the quality of my father's speech, a recognition that jolted me, yet it held no warmth, resounding instead with ancient power. "I am the fire who must be fed," the voice declared, its words shaking the very air. "Your father knew my hunger. He appeased me with flesh and blood to protect himself, to keep his wretched life." A cold dread gripped my stomach. My father had not been consumed by accident. He had been taken. The voice continued, its tone hardening. "You will continue his offerings, or you will share his end, transformed into the sustenance I require." The revelation struck me with force. This entity, the fire who must be fed, existed. It was the monster that had claimed my father, consuming him in his own home. This was the dark secret of his miserable life, the true reason for his lifelong devotion to this place, the hidden cost of his survival. He had not neglected me for work. He had neglected me to feed this thing. This was his burden, now mine. My lungs burned as I stumbled back, sweat pouring down my face and stinging my eyes. I burst out of the chamber door, my legs trembling. Taking ragged breaths, I forced myself to stand still, trying to regain control. Clara stood there in the entryway, a stout man beside her. She smiled warmly, her hand resting on his arm. "This is Mr. Davies," she said, "the real estate agent I told you about." I wiped my face with a sleeve, the metallic tang of fear thick in my mouth. I managed a stiff nod, forcing my lips into a tight smile. The entity's chilling voice echoed, demanding its due. I looked at Mr. Davies, a terrible thought forming in my mind. "Welcome," I said, my voice firm. "I was just inspecting the ovens. I can show you how they work. You need to see them in action, don't you?"